Hey everybody! Today I would like to talk about Into the Wild, a book by Jon Krakauer. And I am doing this video live because I thought it'd be interesting to get my unfiltered, unedited thoughts right on screen. Um, so, Into the Wild is a book, it's a nonfiction book about a man named Christopher McCandless who decides that he is going to give up everything he owns and go and live alone in the woods. And what's interesting about this book is right on the cover here, it actually tells you how the book ends, which is a little bit unusual and different. But you can see here, it says in April 1992, a young man from a well to do family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness north of Mount McKinley. His name was Christopher Johnson McCandless. He had given $25,000 in savings to charity, abandoned his car and most of his possessions, burned all the cash in his wallet, and invented a new life for himself. 4 months later, his decomposed body was found by a moose hunter. So, what initially drew me to this book, first of all, my daughter had this was required reading in my daughter's high school English class. And I'm currently myself writing a survival novella involving my heroine Thalana, who appeared in Ages of Anya. And this novella is called The Feral Girl. And even though it's a fictional fantasy story, I want to imbue my story with as much real world, real life experience as possible. And so I thought the best way to do that would be to read some other books about real survival situations. But what I discovered about Into the Wild is it's not really that much about survival. It's really a book that's more a critique on society and about the world we live in. And it's a book that really makes you think. Um, Now, I think the initial assessment is what an idiot. This guy went out into the woods. He was unprepared. He had these crazy idealistic notions about life, and he ended up getting himself killed. So this is kind of the story about a stupid person. But the author, who is also Jon Krakauer, who actually wrote the book. It's not an autobiography. It's a biography written by another person. The author is actually, he is himself a survivalist, and he's also done some crazy things. He's actually a mountain climber by expertise, and he writes his own story in this book about how he went to climb a mountain in Alaska, and he actually did it in the dead of winter when it was snowing and ice and there was zero invisibility. And he actually tried to climb up this mountain going the more difficult way. So it wasn't just hiking. He literally had to take these climbing hooks, and he had to wear these spiked boots, and I forgot the names of these, like cleats. And he had to literally vertically ascend up this mountain. And he actually died several times trying to do it, especially because the snow kind of covered a lot of these huge, like canyon, drops where you couldn't see where you were going. So I think the author really sympathized with McCandless. And I think in a way, this book is sort of a defense of the choice that McCandless decided to make. And I found myself greatly sympathizing with the character as well, because I grew up in, I think, a similar situation as Christopher McCandless. Christopher McCandless was, he was always an outsider. He was an intellectual. He was a college student. He got straight A's with ease. His father actually was an engineer who worked with NASA. So he came from a very affluent, well-to-do family. So it wasn't like he was, starving for money or for uh, survival. He had a good life, but he gave up everything, his savings, his money, to live on his own. And I think that I identify with this book because when I was in college, I was also very idealistic. And I also found that the society that I lived in wasn't really, it didn't satisfy me. I was consistently disappointed with the world that I lived in. I think this is also why one of my favorite books is Catcher in the Rye, because it has the same idea about a man who's just disappointed with how artificial, how phony society can be. And I think that when it comes to me and Chris, I grew up in a family where all my parents ever did was work. They just worked and worked and worked and worked like slaves. Okay. I never saw my parents, both of them growing up. I hardly ever saw them because all they did is work. When my siblings were young, I have a brother and two sisters, and my parents were so busy working that they actually sent my siblings away. They actually sent them to live in Greece with an aunt for like 10 years. Um, and finally, when my parents felt that they had enough money to raise children, they actually sent for their kids to come back to America. And by then, they were very estranged from my parents. And to this day, my mom cries and she says, I don't know why none of my kids love me. Well, I know the reason. It's because you can't just send your babies away when they're toddlers, and during those formative years when their brains are developing and forming attachments, emotional attachments, you can't expect to just get them back when they're 10 and expect those same emotional attachments to develop. It's just not possible. When I was growing up, I was able to see my parents a little more, but most of my life I really didn't see them. And at that point in time, it wasn't that they were trying to make money to live. It's that they're trying to make money because they were building an empire. They were raising money to build mansions, which they did. They built a very big $1 million home in Greece, and they built another one in Florida. And so, really, it was for the pursuit of money that I never really had a father or a mother. I barely saw them. And this really made me very embittered toward the pursuit of money. And it seemed like the life that I was being told, what life is supposed to be about, is you go to college, you get a good job, and you make money. And then if you make money, you buy nice things, you drive around in a luxury car like a Lexus or something, and you build a big house and you live happily ever after. And I never, even as a child, I never understood this. I always sort of pushed against this narrative. And I said, this doesn't make sense to me because, perhaps if you have a very materialistic worldview, this might make sense. But I never had a materialistic worldview. I always believed that happiness comes from the emotional connections that you make with people, the love that you share with your spouse, with your family, with your friends, and also intellectual pursuits. I felt like intellectual pursuits, finding a greater level of understanding, is where you find happiness. It doesn't come from money. You can have all the money in the world and not be happy. And actually, my parents, I never really saw my parents being happy, even when they had a lot of money and nice cars and nice things in a big house. They always looked miserable to me. And so I saw that as a sign that this is not the life that I want to live. And so, but unlike Christopher McCandless, I really didn't think that I want to go live in the woods alone. I sort of escaped mentally in my books and through fiction. And that's where I found meaning in life. That's where I found happiness in life. And I think Christopher McCandless also found a same kind of contentment in intellectual pursuits because he was an avid reader. He loved Tolstoy, and he loved Robert Frost. And he actually had these books with him in a bus that he found in Alaska that he was using sort of as a campsite. Chris lived alone for 110, 15 days by himself, and he did pretty good. He actually hunted and foraged for survival, and I actually found myself, instead of really feeling sorry for this character, I actually found myself envying this character because he was escaping all of the drudgery of life. He didn't have to deal with taxes. He didn't have to deal with bills. He didn't have to deal with the banks. He didn't have to deal with contracts. He didn't have to deal with people lying to him all the time. I find a great sense of sympathy with this character. He was definitely seeking a deeper, something deeper in his life, that he wasn't able to find in society. And so this is where I find the value in this book. I don't really think you can read this book. My daughter, she read it and she said she didn't really like it because she felt it because it's nonfiction. It reads too much, almost like a newspaper article or a magazine article. The guy who wrote the book, the author is actually one of the writers for Outside Magazine. And so you can tell that a lot of that sort of journalistic style creeps into his writing. But I found it valuable, not so much as really as an adventure story, but almost as an argument, a case to be made for really abandoning the the life that society teaches us we should pursue, and sort of pursuing happiness and meaning on your own terms. So this is something that's very dear to me, and it's something that actually makes me think, especially now, because the lifestyle that my parents set me on. Right now, I'm currently, for the past 20 years, more than 20 years, I've actually worked in a restaurant. I've been a restaurant manager, and I absolutely loathe that job because it is not me. I don't feel um, like I belong in a restaurant. I feel that I belong in a library, in a bookstore, writing, pursuing my literary goals. And this is something that everyone around me, my brother, my sister, my both my parents, always frowned upon. And my mom always, scared me and said, "What are you going to do? You're going to starve. You're going to starve. You're going to starve. If you're a writer, you're going to starve. You need to work in the restaurant." And my dad told me the same thing. The restaurant is your fortune. It's like the ultimate value in life for them was money. And they felt that since that was their purpose in life, that should be their children should find the same purpose, the same value. And unfortunately, it's just not the way I think. And I would rather have less money. Of course, I don't want to be on the streets, but I would be content to live in a small house, in an apartment, and drive a cheap car if I could pursue the things that give my life meaning and value. And so this is why I kind of envy this character. Not that he died, of course, and he didn't want to die. He actually had plans to come back to civilization. He just wanted to live for a little bit of time in the woods. And I've actually spent some time hiking in the woods myself. So I know what that feels like. I understand that exhilarating feeling of sort of abandoning the world and abandoning all the things that come with being sort of shackled to society. I know what that feels like. And so I don't envy his death, but I envy his courage. I envy the fact that he had the courage at just fresh out of high school. He had the courage to pursue his ambitions and his dreams. I think that if I had known Chris, I think I would have been good friends with him. I think I would have really loved to talk to him and to sit down with him and to talk about life and philosophy and books and writers. I think I would have really loved knowing the guy. It's a shame that he died. Who knows where he would be today if he hadn't died. He died in his 20s. I think he was 22, 23 when he died. But I envy him. And I kind of wish that more people were to find a way to unplug from the world and from the sort of the life that we are sort of pushed into by friends and family and academia and social media. And I wish more people had the confidence and the courage and the strength to just to pursue their own path. I wish that we all could do that, and find that money, of course, a certain amount of money is necessary to live, but money does not equal happiness. A good job that pays well does not necessarily equal happiness. Going to college and having a degree does not necessarily equal happiness. There are other paths that you can take in life, and we don't need to listen to what we are told by the people around us that perhaps they lack the imagination or the passion that we do. And it's like, just because you lack that passion doesn't mean that we should all lack that passion to do what we want. So this is the message that I got from this book. I think talking about the style and the quality in this situation, I don't think that really matters. I think that Into the Wild is a good book to read because of the meanings you can get out of it, and because it really makes you think about life, and it makes you think about what's important in life, and how precious and how short life really is. I think it's a good book. It reminds me a lot of Catcher in the Rye. I think I kind of see it's not quite as good as Catcher in the Rye. I wouldn't say that, but I kind of view it as the nonfiction version of Catcher in the Rye. So, Into the Wild, I highly recommend it. If you read it, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Leave it in the comments. That's my take. And if you like this more live stream, impromptu format, let me know. And I'll do more book reviews like this. So if you've been listening, thanks for listening. I hope this video made you think. So I'm Nick Alamonos, and that's it. Signing off.